I'm Ashley Thomas, and here is my late review of Aquaman, the latest entry within the DC cinematic universe, and directed by James Wan. So okay, Aquaman. This film was so much fun. It was so exciting. I enjoyed this film so much. I had such a good time watching this film. It was just, the action in this movie is incredible, it's epic, it's fun, it's exciting. If there's one word that just keeps springing to my mind when I think of this movie, it is fun. And it's good old-fashioned fun. It sort of reminded me a little bit of Indiana Jones, you know, a little bit of Star Wars. There was certain elements of Lord of the Rings, and it just reminded me of the movies that I grew up watching and loving from the 80s and all of that. And it was, yeah, I just had so much fun watching this film. I just want to talk more about the action scenes because they were, you know, they're just so incredibly fun to watch. The way in which James Wan shot these action scenes, the way, you know, it was just so creative and imaginative. You'd have a chase scene in which you'd have a camera following these characters running and just smashing through all of these walls, and it was just so immersive as a result. Now sometimes when it comes to action scenes, they can throw you out depending on how an action scene is shot, but I really dug on what James Wan did in this movie when it came to the action, because there is so much going on. It's so wild and exciting, yet you still sort of stayed immersed into the world and that into that scene and into that moment. You're not once thrown out. And I just found the action scenes, like the movie, just incredibly fun, very imaginative and creative and just immersive. I'm going to use fun. I'm going to use that word fun quite a lot in this review, because this movie was just that. It was good old-fashioned fun. And there were also moments in which the action was just very tense. You had some really tense action scenes in this movie, and I was just sort of gripped. I was just glued to the screen, and I was sucked into this world. And that's what James Wan did a really good job with Aquaman, and that is transport you into this world that he was trying to bring to life onto the screen. And he did a really good job with doing that, and that's what any director or any filmmaker should do. And that is transport you into the world and into the story that they're trying to tell. And James Wan did that. Yeah, the action in this movie is just incredible. The third act, there's only one word to describe the third act, and that is epic. And it's the moment which I thought was very Lord of the Rings. You have this massive battle that goes on that is very Lord of the Rings, and it's just incredible. I had a massive grin on my face. You've got sharks with mounted laser cannons and laser guns, and you've got soldiers on seahorses, and it was amazing. It's everything that you want these sort of films to be like, you know, these fantasy action movies, and it was just incredible. It was so much fun. And that leads me into the visuals. This is a beautiful movie to look at. There's some stunning cinematography in this movie, some visually stunning moments and scenes. It is just, and as a result, like the film just captivates you. It's so visually striking. It's very vibrant, and it just sort of really just transports you into this world, and you just can't take your eyes off the screen. This movie is 2 hours and like 25 minutes. Does not feel like that. And yeah, like I said, with the visuals, this was a visually stunning film, and you know, some beautiful moments and some beautiful shots. And you do have some sort of slow-mo shots in this film, which are very Zack Snyder. Now, I'm a massive Zack Snyder fan, and I love Zack Snyder's style, so I really dug those moments. But yeah, when it comes to the visuals and the cinematography, this was a very nice film to look at. There are some beautiful shots and moments. And now I've read and heard a lot of people commenting that there's way too much CGI, or there's an awful lot of it. I disagree. I think there was the right amount of CGI and practical. I was actually surprised on how much sort of practical sets were used in this film. A lot of the sets that these characters are on, a lot of those sets were real. Yes, there's a few, you know, there is a bit of blue screen here and there, and there's a bit of CGI here and there, But I really thought that there was the right amount of balance between CGI and practical. You know, same goes for the costumes. Like, you get some of these soldiers that are in these really cool suits, and you got the villain Black Manta. Now, they could have easily have done Black Manta CGI, but they didn't. And you could tell it was a real guy in a suit. And I loved that. They could have easily have gone... There were a lot of moments in this film in which they could have easily have gone down the route of CGI, but they didn't. And as a result, just makes the film feel a little bit more real. It makes the experience a little bit more real. And I just really appreciated when I could see that they were actually on a practical set and they'd gone through the effort of making as much as they could real. I just really like that. Like, there is a lot of CGI, especially when they're underwater. I mean, there is an incredible amount of CGI used in this film when they're underwater. But you expect that. But there are moments in which they could have just gone CGI and they didn't. And I really appreciated that. And usually when there's so much CGI being used, as you would come to expect with moments and scenes, like in the third act with Aquaman during that epic battle scene, when there's so much CGI being used, it would usually throw you out of the movie, throw you out of the story in that moment. But for me, it didn't. And as a result of the CGI in this film is actually really, really good. CGI was so good that I was still sort of absorbed into this world. I was still sort of immersed into this world, and not once did they throw me out. They use a lot of actors on wires as well, so you could tell the people are there existing within this world, and as a result helps add to the film just feeling a little bit more sort of real, you could say, and not just throwing you out. So even though there's a lot of CGI used in these certain action scenes, in these moments, I still remained immersed into the world and into the film. I also really liked the score by Rupert Gregson-Williams. He also did the score for Wonder Woman. I really like what he did here with Aquaman. He uses synths quite a bit. There's one particular moment in which he uses synths and Aquaman is approaching Atlantis. And it reminded me so much of Blade Runner. I felt like the score was in moments inspired by the Blade Runner score. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But when I was watching that particular scene of Aquaman approaching Atlantis, I was just thinking, wow, this is sort of very Blade Runner. And I liked it, I loved it. And a lot of the elements of the music really help elevate certain scenes in this film when it comes to, you know, the action movies. It's a very epic sounding score. I really dug it. Jason Momoa as Aquaman, Arthur Curry. I love what he's doing with the character. I love the sense of humour that he brings to the character as well, and he gives a solid performance. Same goes for Amber Heard, his love interest, Mira. She was also really good. Performance-wise overall, everyone was pretty good. Everyone gives solid performances. And that's going to sort of lead me now into the negatives of the film. Because there was a lot I loved about Aquaman. There's a lot I really liked about Aquaman. But it does have its negatives. And one of the biggest negatives for me when it came to this film was the script. The dialogue. Oh my god, I cringed in places. The dialogue, the script, at times felt like it was written by a 5-year-old, and for me it didn't work. There were a few lines that Aquaman would say that was meant for sort of comedic value, and it just didn't work. And there were some other lines that he might have said, or other characters that said, and it just actually literally made me cringe because I thought, oh, that could have been probably written slightly better. But the actors did their very best, I felt, with what was a very, very poor script. Like, I'm not saying the script is all bad, because there were actually some really nice lines in this movie that I liked, that some of the characters delivered, and I'd be like, oh, that's a really nice line there. But there were also moments in which they would deliver certain lines and it was like, who the hell wrote that? And it just sort of didn't quite sort of fit in with the character or the scene or the moment, and it would sort of just throw you, well, it threw me out a little bit, because I was like, oh, I didn't quite like how that particular line or what it was he just said, and it just sort of like, ah. So sticking with performances, Patrick Wilson as the villain, King Orm, Aquaman's half-brother. He gives an okay performance. I really like Patrick Wilson. I like Patrick Wilson in almost everything that he's in, that he's done. But when it comes to the villain in this movie, I couldn't help but feel that maybe he was slightly miscast. Because like I said, he gives an okay performance, but when it comes to being the villain, you know, the main villain of the movie, the story, I just felt he was sort of very underwhelming. He lacked the intimidating presence that I really wanted this villain to have. You know, that sort of menacing, intimidating presence that a villain should have. And I just felt like he lacked that. And it just, as a result, the villain for me felt kind of weak. So that was a little bit of a disappointment for me, because I like Patrick Wilson, and I really thought that he looked the part. You know, when he's when he's in the suit and he puts that mask on, he just looks the part. He looks great on the screen, but when it comes to the performance side of it, he just really lacked that intimidating and menacing presence that a villain should have with it. I also would have liked there to have been more of a young Arthur Curry. Now we do get a moment, we get a couple of moments where we sort of see Arthur Curry sort of growing up and where he's training, so we get a few flashbacks, but I wanted a little bit more. Like, this is one particular moment of a very young Arthur Curry, and he's in an aquarium, he's on a school trip. And I really liked that moment. It was, you know, it's a really nice moment, but I wanted a bit more of those moments, just so it could have added a little bit more background and depth to the character of Aquaman, which I felt like this film needed. And so that sort of leads me then into how fast this movie seems to roll along. You know, this movie is relentless. It just doesn't stop. And as a result, like I said, it's so exciting and fun. But I do wish they would have given us a few more moments which we could have caught our breath, and had a few nicer sort of slower character moments in which we could have just sort of got to have known Aquaman and just sort of dig a little bit deeper into the character of Aquaman a little bit more. And that's what I was sort of looking for. But we didn't kind of, for me anyway, we didn't kind of get that. We sort of just got the Aquaman that we were introduced to in Justice League, which is great, because like I said, I'm really digging what Jason Momoa is doing with the character. But I just wanted to have a little bit more depth to the character. I wanted to explore the character a little bit more, which for me they didn't quite do enough of. And then there's the humour. Now the humour was very mixed for me. There were moments in which I thought it worked, and then there were moments in which I just think it just sort of fell flat, and it just felt forced. But not once did the humour in this film feel marvelised. Now what I mean by that is a term that I used in which I felt like what these films were going to do, or what they were going to try and do with the DC cinematic universe, was to sort of inject that sort of Marvel humour. Now I'm not a massive fan of the Marvel humour, and they sort of did that with Justice League, but when it comes to Aquaman, the humour felt a little bit more natural. It felt like it belonged within this story and with this character and within this world. But at times it did feel a little bit forced. But the humour that did work was mostly that came along with Aquaman and with what Jason Momoa was actually doing with the character. And like I said, there were a couple of moments in which it looked like Jason Momoa was improvising. And I really liked that. So yeah, for me, the humour was kind of mixed. But I just sort of appreciated that the humour wasn't sort of trying to replicate what Marvel were doing. It was sort of its own thing. At times the humour worked, but then other times it just felt forced and out of place. And so as a result, you know, like with the tone, this film, I wouldn't say the tone was 100% consistent with this movie, because then you will get the humour, and at times it was like, oh, where did that come from? And it was like, it just felt forced. So it's sort of, the film doesn't really know, it felt as if the film didn't know how sort of silly it wanted to be and how serious it wanted to be. So the tone wasn't quite as consistent as it could have been, but it didn't throw you out the film. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Aquaman. It's good old fashioned fun. I highly recommend it. You get transported into the world for 2.5 hours. You don't even realise it's almost 2.5 hours. Oh, by the way, the costumes as well. I really like the costumes, especially when you get Aquaman in his iconic sort of... It's more of a gold in this movie, like a yellowy gold. And the green, I just thought they were the perfect colour choices, and he looks absolutely amazing when he comes out of that waterfall. It's in the trailers and he's wearing the costume. I just had a big grin on my face. The costumes in this film, and I believe they've been nominated actually for costume design in this movie. Well deserved. I really like the costumes in this film. And Dolph Lundgren, I gotta mention Dolph Lundgren. He's in it. He's in this movie. He's not in this movie that much. He's in some moments within the movie, but whenever he's on the screen, he sort of steals the moment because it's Dolph Lundgren. It's He-Man, you know. And I really liked what he did with his character in this film, and he just looked the part. He looked cool. I loved it. I really think that whoever goes in to see this film, you might not be a DC fan, you might be a Marvel fanatic, or you know, whoever you are. If you go and watch this film, you're going to have a good time. You're going to enjoy it. It's epic. It's the third act of this movie is massive. And I had a massive smile on my face throughout the third act. So yeah, I hope James Wan directs the sequel to this. I think James Wan did a really good job with this movie. It's not a perfect movie. And it does have flaws. Like I said, I mentioned a few of the negatives that I had, but overall it was a very enjoyable experience. I had a good time. I just wanted a little bit more when it came to character and sort of, you know, developing the character of Arthur Curry and just sort of digging into his character a little bit and adding a little bit more depth. And the script was also really, really bad, but you just couldn't help but have fun with this film. I had so much fun, and like I said, I was going to use that word fun so much in this review because that's what this film is. And I just had, you know, it was an enjoyable time. I was smiling. I remained immersed in this world. And yes, there were a couple of things that didn't quite work for me, but overall I highly recommend it, and I will be giving Aquaman a B. But what do you guys think about Aquaman? Let me know below. Was there anything you agreed or disagreed with what I said? Then let me know below and let's get a discussion going. And thanks again so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you want to see future movie reviews from me and just general movie talk, then don't forget to hit subscribe.